The budget is the one and only, the most important document of every state. Some would say, in fact, at every level, local governments, states, and the federal government. But how are the people of the local governments, the state, or even the federal engage with this budget? To what extent, really, do you know what is the, in the budget, and how does it affect you? Do you think the budget is even important? Do you feel that that little thing that you're doing, that little business that you're doing, is not affected by government's policies and programs? How do you engage with the budget? Well, today we're going to break down several things, especially as it concerns the budget, as it concerns not just you, but everyone across the country. We have with us in the studio Dr. Uzochukwu Amakom. Is a Senior Research Fellow, Institute for the Development Studies, UNEC. Good to have you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know if Nigerians think that the budget is important. It's usually a big deal when the federal government comes to announce a budget, maybe present it to the National Assembly, or even the state government comes and state everything that they want to do and then put amounts therein. Do you think Nigerians follow through some of these things that are told them in the budget?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. How do I start? I will say that I believe the circumstances around a lot of things, especially our development, are the things affecting the way Nigerians see budget. I will not, I remember in the 1980s, when I was in primary school, I didn't know anything about the budget. But I remember that any day the budget is being presented, my teachers then don't teach. It was a serious affair. We will see them under the mango tree discussing it. After the presentation, they come back in the class, you see one teacher moving from his or her classroom to another, and they are discussing it. That was how I became interested in budget. That time I was less than 10.
Wow.
But because of every year, that day that budget is being presented, I noticed that something happens in the school. The teachers are not themselves, which tells you that they believe it affects them. And that's why they are interested.
Is it the same thing now?
No, that's why I'm telling you that maybe the circumstances surrounding our development has affected everything we do as a country. You can also see that the way we react to government policies are no longer the same. There was a time that when government announce new policy or policy changes, people begin to react. But this time around, everybody has this "I don't care" attitude. I don't care.
What really changed, really?
That means that something is wrong. The fundamentals are now wrong, and people no longer believe that it's going to affect them. I remember, just like I was telling you, I remember the very first day Nigeria budgeted $1 million. That was during Babangida era at the federal level. My teachers, my elder people, everybody, even my parents, who were priests, were discussing about it, how it's going to affect the country. But this time around, we left million, entered billion. Now we are in trillion. Maybe very soon we enter quadrillion. And nobody cares, because at the end of the day, they don't see how it affects them. Which means that something is fundamentally wrong.
Is it that they don't see how it affects them from the aspect of the implementation of the budget, or that the government deliberately don't allow these budget provisions to get to them?
It's both. One, you talk about the implementation, which I don't really believe as a person that that's the most important thing. I believe that the most important thing should be what's the content of the budget. Yeah, because when you have, budget is garbage in, garbage out. If you have rubbish in your budget, if you implement, it becomes rubbish. But if you have real issues in your budget, when you implement, it will affect people. I remember when you see a project in the budget, you find out that before the end of the year, that project somehow has been done.
Yeah.
So when such happens, implementation is not a problem. You know it will be implemented. But today, most people cry about implementation. I don't cry about implementation. I cry about the content of the budget. Because if we assume that all these things will be implemented, how will it affect us? I think that's the most important thing. And once we get it right there, and we now push again for it to be implemented, at least at the end of the day, you expect, because there is this expectation. As a family, when you sit down with your wife and children and say, oh, in 2025, this is what we want to achieve. Sometimes you don't have money, but you've projected you are going to do that. You'll find out that the first month that comes, your wife begins to ask you, honey, what's the next thing? I think you said we are going to do this. We are going to buy a car. We are going to buy these things. You now see that when you go on to implement that thing, the entire family will be good. The entire family will be happy with you. But when nobody knows what you intend to implement and how it's going to affect them. So, and that's the problem with some of the budgets in the country, especially at the state level. There are so many what I call frivolous items, irrelevant issues.
Okay, before we come to the frivolous issues in our budget, what should form a content of a budget? Because I don't know how many state government or even the federal government go ask, members of the public what they want before a budget is formed.
Yeah.
They just go ahead and write certain things. So,
in fact, before you talk about budget, you ask yourself, does that state has a plan? Yeah, because what's the budget? Budget is a plan that funds a plan, a bigger plan. So you have a plan, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years. Nigeria said they have what they call Agenda 2050. So they are looking at 30 years plan because it started in 2020. They are looking at 30 years plan. So the budget is telling you, out of these 30 years, this is what I do in the first year. This is what I do in the first year. In the second year, this is what I do in the third year, and so on. But when you see them discuss budget, I don't think this is what they do. Because you see them talk about rubbish, and you see the National Assembly sit down and put in whatever they want to put in without a recourse to that plan. So, and what we have advocated is that for you as a state, get a plan. Let all stakeholders look at your plan and approve that plan. Because if everybody, let's say a state says, this is where we are today, and we want to be here in the next 10 years. Everybody already know that for you to get to Onitsha from Enugu, for example, you must pass through Oji. You must pass through Uji. You must get to Oka, and so on. So if you come to the first year and say, our target is to get to 9th mile from Enugu, everybody knows you are in the right direction because the target is to get to Onitsha. And that will now help people to now know whether the content of your budget will help you to get to 9th mile. You can't be talking of getting to 9th mile from Enugu, whereas you are hiring a vehicle that goes to Abakaliki. The people will now say, no, that vehicle will not take us to 9th mile. It will only take us to Abakaliki and make the journey longer. Do you now see why I say the content of the budget matters? Not just the implementation, because if the content is not going to lead you to where you are going, you find out that even if you implement it 100%, you may not achieve a lot at the end of the day. So that's what, when you have a plan, you now break it. Year 1, year 2. In fact, if you have a perspective plan or a long-term plan of 20, 30 years, we now advocate that you have what we call medium-term expenditure framework that covers 3 years. The first 3 years, this is what we want to achieve. You now break it down. When people see that you are medium-term expenditure framework, or MTEF in short, they'll say, okay, yes, the big picture is this, but this is where we want to be in the next 3 years, which is very comfortable for every politician. After all, we have 4 years term. So you can say the first 3 years of my administration, this is where we get to. People will judge you based on what you have set out. Rather than waking up in the morning and say, oh, this is what I want to achieve, this is what I want to achieve. Tomorrow you go to another state, you visit them, you come back, you change your course. And it starts affecting the way you budget. And that's what we have seen I won't mention some states. I was having a discussion with one of the permanent secretary in one of the states. And I asked, why do you have this number of flyovers in your budget? Do you know the response? Oh, don't even go there. All the neighbors, all our neighboring states have enough flyovers. We are the only ones that don't have flyovers. So you now see that, maybe, will I call it sentiments? Will I call it? So is that the priority of the states? No. Oh, you just want to be like other states. That's why you are having flyovers. In fact, I was telling somebody that the set of governors we have in the last 5-6 years, it's like they are flyover governors. As if without flyover, you've not achieved anything. Even you get to some of the junctions where all those things. I'm not saying they are bad, though. No, don't quote me. I am saying that, are these things the priorities of the people?
But again, when you speak of these issues around changing the tide, right, in the middle of the course, we've seen people or state governors who don't have certain things in their manifesto, but as they got into government, they just think that they needed to add something.
Yeah, you can revise. You can revise, but that does not change the direction of the course.
Okay.
You may now say, oh, I want to get to Onisha. Let's continue with that analogy. You now find out that the boss, because of technological improvements and all those things, that there are better ways of getting to Onisha faster. Then that can lead to revision. But not a whole discontinuity of what. Remember that this plan must be approved by your state. That means all stakeholders in the state approve this is where we need to be if you want to do it right.
Absolutely.
So if they have approved that this is where we need to be, you as the chief executive, I keep encouraging, as an economist, I say, the only thing you come up with, because you'll be elected, is you can now manipulate the methodology by saying, oh, this method will get me there faster than. I don't like using US to give example, but if you look at the Republicans and the Democrats, if you listen to them very well, you find out that they are not different. They have the same target for US. The only difference is the methodology. How do we get there? They want development. They want this. They want that. This person is saying, I have a better method. This person is saying, I have a better policy that will get us there. Let me give you fiscal policy in US. The Republicans want to give tax cuts to billionaires because they believe in what they call trickling down economics. The more they invest, the more it gets to others. The Democrats don't want that. They want them to pay higher taxes so that we can get that money and use it to attend to the poor. So you find out that two of them are saying the same thing. Only that this one is saying, let me take that money and invest it in what will affect the poor. Whereas the other one is saying, no, if I give them tax cuts, they will be able to invest and it will affect the poor. So it's just the same thing. So the problem we have, especially with the states, are not even having a plan. Do your research. I will not mention any state, but we find out that so many states have no plan.
No plan?
No document you call a plan that says this is where we need to be. Anambra has a plan that takes them to 2070.
But I thought that they have a manifesto, whatever government is coming on
No,
board.
manifesto is not a plan. Your manifesto is just like out of the big plan. You are now saying, just like what I say, that manifesto is telling you the methodology of what you want, how to achieve that plan. But most places, you don't see that plan in itself, where you will say, in the next 20 years, this state will be here. It's missing in so many places. So some will have 3-4 years and all those things. That doesn't. We have to plan. There is this popular saying that once you fail to plan, you've already planned to do what? To fail. And when you talk about it, some people will say, oh, these theoreticians. I said, no. Nigeria got derailed, let's be honest. Why did we, the World Bank and IMF, they confused us? Is when we stopped having a development plan. Go and check how the development indices from 1960 to 1984 and what Nigeria achieved within this period. You can't compare it with what we have achieved after SAP in 1986 when we stopped having a plan. Because then we have a development plan, what we call a rolling plan. You have the first development plan that tells us, I can recite what each of them said. And you find out that we achieved all of them. Kainji, all these things were in our plan. That was how we know that we can borrow money from the World Bank to build Kainji. And we were able to achieve that. Today, we borrow money to pay salaries. Are you going to put such a thing in your plan? You cannot. You cannot have in your plan to borrow money to pay salaries. It shows you that something is missing.
Fundamentally wrong.
Something is fundamentally wrong. And when you say it, people don't want to listen to us. I say, we must go back. It may not be called a development plan, it may not be called a rolling plan, but you need a plan. You need a plan which everybody, every member of the society will agree to. It's in Igbo they say that it doesn't mean that everybody should start urinating in the same place. It has some connotation. That means you have to come together and agree at something.
Absolutely.
When you agree at something, everybody now says, okay, this is my role. Now, you find out that the academy, I'm from the university, we have no role in development. I'm sorry to say it. Some of us may not even know that we are supposed to have a role, but they came into the university without knowing that the university has a role to play in development. They think that the role of the university is to train students and give them degrees. No, there are other things. There are other things that you need to do in order to feed back into the system. It's something, it's cyclic.
Right. What are those things in the budget for the states that you know of that are frivolous, that are not supposed to be?
Yeah, there are some issues, so many. Why do I call it frivolous? There are two components. Some are not frivolous because of what they are to be used for, but because of the amount that have been attached to them. Okay, let's give an example. Like I said, I don't want to mention any state, but I have looked at the budget of all the 36 states.
All the 36 states?
All the 36 states for 2025.
All?
From 2020 to 2025. All the 36 states.
I don't understand.
That's the only thing I do. Apart from eating and sleeping. That's the only thing I do.
Wow.
So when you see that, you begin to see, let's say, I saw in a state in 2025, the amount meant for feeding people during the fasting period.
The amount meant for feeding people during the fasting period
may be so huge. You begin to say, are there no better things to do? Nobody is against feeding, but you begin to ask yourself some question. Let's say in 2025, for example, you won't believe that after Lagos, the next state with the highest budget, highest in terms of total amount, is Niger. Niger. I know you are surprised.
Wow.
Yeah, Niger is the next state. And I know you are surprised because you expected some other states to be there. But I'm not singling them out, I'm just giving you an example. But if you see the amount dedicated to education in Niger, even with their low literacy rate, it is not commensurate with what is happening there. So you look at the situation, like I said, if you have a plan, your plan takes into account the situational analysis. You know where you have a problem. I was telling a state governor that, do you know what it means and what it will take you to move literacy rate from 54 that his state is from 52, because he said his target is to get them to 70% in 4 years. I said, Your Excellency, that's not possible. I said, do you know what it means to move literacy rate from 54% to 55%? He said, this is not just 1 point. I said, no, it's not. It's not. It's not. Don't see it, because that's the mentality of that not having a plan, a concrete plan, because they believe you can just juggle with the number. I said, for you, first, you can't even tell me the population of your state. And you are correct. Can you tell me the number of children between maybe less than, let's say, 12 years? You can't. You can't even tell me the exact number that are out of school. And you can't even tell me the location of those numbers, or the gender, whether they are male or whether they are female. I say you have to get all these facts. When you get all these facts, you now say, okay, that means for us to move it from 54 to 55, we need to get additional 200,000 literates. Then you now begin to say, what's the implication of getting 200,000, for example, to be literate within 1 year? What does it take? It affects primary, it affects secondary, it affects even the planners, the Ministry of Education, the administration. It affects a lot of things. That's why plan is important. So you now find out that before you do that, I said, you know that even if you spend all your budget for the next 4 years in education alone, you may not get that 70%, because it involves a lot of things. And you don't even have these facts. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, data is not our brother. So those are the things. So you now see, so why I call them frivolous is you see us pointing to the wrong issues. Just like I said, why should, but people will accuse me of saying that amounts dedicated for building flyover is frivolous. But if you look at it in the right sense of it, you find out that for that permanent secretary that says, we just need a flyover because our neighboring state has one. So it's frivolous. I don't know whether you get it. But the people will think that I call them frivolous because they will be spent on things that it doesn't make meaning to the average person in the state. Because I remember I asked him, I know the biggest junction in your state capital, and I know they have never been a hold up there. Because for you to start constructing a flyover, you need to know the number of cars that uses that road and why you need to build it. These are not rocket science. It requires somebody to sit down and think and plan. So they may have huge amount. You may see so many. So maybe I won't call them frivolous, but you call them white elephants.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But what aspect of budgeting do you think should receive the most allocation, and why?
That's another case. In fact, let me give you facts. I told you I've seen the state budget for how many years now? 5 to 6 years. Let me just list.
I'm shocked you're able to go through all the budget.
Yes, that's all I do in my life. So I have no other option than to look at them. Let me tell you, there have been this emphasis on capital and recurrence. Everywhere you see state governors talking, everything capital, recurrent, capital, recurrent, capital, recurrent. But let me tell you, do you know that when you look at the components of that capital, you begin to see that most of the capital budgets are not capital budgets. 2025 alone, you see school feeding. These are the components of the capital budget which are being celebrated. Exam fees, diesel for generators, constituency allowance, mass purchase of something, risk communication, promotion of awareness of girl-child education. These are the things they're called, and these are things that are taking large amounts of money in the budget. Leadership skills and performance appraisals, medical assistance. Are these things capital, Charles, my brother? You find out that they are not capital. And we've discovered that debt service is a huge component of the budget. Everybody is indebted, domestic, external. So what they do is to now move the debts, everything debts, into the capital and begin to tell you, oh, we have 75% capital and 25% recurrent. Well, at the end of the day, if you look at them, you find out that no. Now, in the real sense of it, recurrent is more than the capital. And you see some say, oh, the federal government, they have 20-something% capital and 70-something%. It's better you know the real content.
Absolutely.
And that will not increase your expectation, because at the end of the day, you're expecting 25% capital. Rather than say 60% capital, 40% recurrent, where in the real sense of it, if you begin to look at the budget line item by line item, you find out that there are more recurrent than capital. Then, like I said, what makes up that capital is also very important, because if what makes up that capital is that flyover that leads to nowhere, you begin to see, you now see where I call it frivolous, or let me say white elephant. So that's why I said we need to go back to plan, where everybody will agree that this is where we need to be. And you see people walking towards that. I know that Nigerians, a lot of people are no longer interested in governance. But we have to come back. We can't be crying that we want development, but we don't want to play a role. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you put it that way, it would seem that the problem is from the people alone. Because it does look like the government deliberately make the governance become so unattractive for people to even look at what they're doing. You know, when somebody tries to criticize them, they come after you.
Yeah. Send an attack dog after you.
So you want to...
Which I may not be surprised if they send one after me after this interview. So that's, we are just saying the same thing. There's a time, there's a place, I've forgotten, there's a place I said that sometimes if you look at what's happening in the country, you find out that the increase in poverty and inequality, if you say they are state-sponsored, you may not be wrong.
State-sponsored?
Yes, but not directly. What do I mean by being state-sponsored? When the ruling class somehow wants you not to be part of what is happening, because they believe that once you become part of it and start asking questions, things will change. If you end up being poor, is it not state-sponsored? Because they are spending your money every year, but you are not getting better. If you are getting worse, that means they are spending money to make you worse. I don't know whether you now get what I mean by state-sponsored. It's not a direct like, oh, go and pay this person to be a poor. But if we hear all these billions, millions,
and it's not making our life any better.
Every year you keep complaining. You keep complaining of water. You keep complaining of no access road. You keep complaining of, I can't pay my school fees. Something is wrong. Because our constitution has listed what the state should do. And the only way they can achieve that is through the budget. I tell civil society organizations that budget is the second most important document after the constitution. Because there is nothing in your constitution that can be realized without the budget. It's like, okay, the analogy I gave last week was, when you have a child that is 1 year, even less than 1 year, and you give him or her anything, what's the reaction? What does he or she do? Takes it to the mouth. Because that's the interest. Whether it's fire, to the mouth. So we should also do so. Our budget should be to that thing that's our priority. And for us to get our priorities right, there is need for us to agree on something. Some will say, oh, is it possible to get everybody to agree? There is no how, let's say, for Enugu State to come together in one hall and agree. But there is a way to get people to buy into what you want to achieve.
So, in a nutshell, you would say that the budget that we have had since 2023 up until now has been one that has been badly done.
Not just 2023. Our budget and our budgeting system is faulty.
All our budgeting system.
Yes.
Across the country.
Across the country. Why do I say it's faulty? I go back to not having a comprehensive plan. Because even those states that have plan, if you go to the plan and go to the budget, you may see a disconnect. So until everybody agrees, until we know we do the right thing by having a plan, agreeing on that plan, so that when people who prepares budget do something that is different from the plan, we can ask questions. I give you an analogy. We can now say, this vehicle you are getting to us is taking us to Abakaliki and not to Nightmare. It shows that there is a plan. There is an agreement. That's the only way. So most times I don't even blame citizens for not doing much in the budget, because they don't even know where this budget is taking you to. So, but for when you now see maybe a state that has plan, and you begin to now juxtapose that with the budget, you now see another huge disconnect. And that's why we keep spending all this money. At the end of the day, nothing happens. So we tell you, oh, it is not well implemented. I said, it is not well implemented because it is not part of the plan.
For it to be well implemented.
Yes. Because you don't have a plan, because if you have a plan, part of the component of that plan is to tell you how to implement your budget. It's not, it's just, I call it common sense.
But how do we change all of this? We've highlighted the issues.
We must start somewhere.
Yeah, but how do we change all of it?
First, we have blamed the governance actors well. It is time for us to now say, enough is enough. What is our role as citizens? Do we just sit here and complain and say that nothing works? If we decide that's what we do, you will do it for 20, you will do it all the days of your life and you will not achieve anything. We have to start coming together. I am calling on organized level. Most times when I see how they do their thing, I get confused. I said, is it not time the organized labor, whether it's NLC, TUC, ASU, all those organized professionals, should we continue to talk about our salaries instead of advocating for the right thing to be done? Because why do we not have maybe the kind of salary we want to have? Or why is it that it's not enough for us to use it? After 2 years, you begin to agitate for increase. It's because something is fundamentally wrong. Can we go back to our drawing board? I've never seen NLC. I'm not accusing NLC, but I'm telling you my facts. I've never seen NLC after budget presentation at the federal level, at the state level. I've never seen TUC, I've never seen ASU, I've never seen NASU, I've never seen all these professionals and Nigerian Medical Association, all these people, saying we've looked at the budget to our sector and we believe that ABC is not correct. You don't do that. ASU don't do that in November, December when budget is presented. But you come in June during implementation and begin to ask for increment. Where do you want the government to get it from? I don't know whether it makes, I know some people will say, oh, you are making it technical. It is not technical. I have asked my colleague, I said, don't you believe that we need to start on time? talk about plans, talk about policies, so that if all these things are captured in our plans and the policies are there to execute them, if they now come up with budget and we don't see them, we begin to say, no, 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 our plans say you must do this, and I did not see it in your budget. But you keep quiet. At the middle of the year, you begin to say that I did not say, you have not done this for me. Yet you want them to follow the rule of law. Yet you want them to implement the budget to the letter. Allow them to implement it the way it has been passed. If there is need for you to intervene, there is a time for everything. There is a time when budget is presented and is being debated by the National Assembly or State Assembly. I think all stakeholders should come and become interested. That's why you now see some states, you present a budget today, tomorrow it's passed.
Yeah, it happened last year.
It's because nobody cares. And when even is, but if they know that there are organized professionals that they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Where are ICANN? These are organized professionals who understands how these things are done. You don't act until it's late. So it now keeps us in a place where we are always complaining.
Right. Just to wrap it up, because we are out of time, do you think our every state's IGR can sustain them? Because there are people who have also
no. If you look
IGR
at, in fact,
states.
let me not even, I don't want to forecast anything. Let's just go to the 2025 budgets of all the 36 states. You'll find out that the entire budget...
If we can do a few, like
yes.
maybe to the southeast also.
Okay, let me just look at the entire country. The entire country, 36 states, their budget is about 26 trillion, 26.616 trillion. Out of that, 12.012 trillion is coming from FAC, the forecast, and only 5.49 trillion is coming from IGR. What does that tell you? 68.64% of the entire state budget is coming from FAC. Only 31 is coming from IGR. Then when you look at some states, you find out that some states, there are some states that are dependent on FAC up to 90%. Yeah. In fact, from what I am seeing here, from my chart, from the forecast, not actual, from what the states projected themselves, they will get from IGR, they will get from this thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Only 8 states will get more than 30% of their projected revenue from IGR.
Wow.
More than 30. So others,
Not less than 30.
70% and above are from FAC. So everything. So when 70% of your revenue is coming from FAC, then you know you are. So those are Lagos, Enugu, Ogun, Niger, Oyo, Rivers, Osun, Abia, Kaduna, Kwara, Nasarawa, and Jigawa. These are the ones that will get up to 30% of their revenue from IGR.
Sure.
So that means that other states projected that less than 30% of their revenue will come from IGR. How can you say that? So that tells you that most of the things we call states are not viable.
Wow.
So without FAC, 36 minus 8, without FAC, 28% of the states cannot operate based on their projection. These are not actual figures.
Yeah.
Which you know that in the actual, you may find out that maybe out of these 8, 3 or 4 may even drop off and join the other.
Absolutely.
So those are the things.
We just have to leave it here. Dr. Uzochukwu, Amakom, I mean, we can talk about this even a lot more than another program. We'll talk about the effects, and how the budget so far has affected Nigerians and how they can, engage with it. But we have to stop here because of time. Thank you so much for your expert analysis on the budget.
Thank you.
We truly appreciate you.
Thank you.
He's a senior research fellow, Institute of Development Studies, UNEC. Dr. Uzochukwu Amakom, giving us an insight into the budget. We're back shortly after this, so stay with us.
Save Nature TV. News in your pocket.